Hello and welcome to a Puzzled Panda video. Here are 100 facts about Peter Pan. Peter Pan is Disney's 14th animated feature film, and it was released in 1953. It is based on the play Peter Pan, The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up by J.M. Barrie. The play started at the Duke of York Theatre in 1904. The story became an instant classic, and that has been proven by how the story has stood the test of time. It has had many iterations over the years.
Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your television set. This is a pixie bell. The sound is much too high for human ears. Oh, there you are, Tink. Hey, get that stuff off of me. If you're familiar with the story of Peter Pan, you know that a little sprinkling of Tinkerbell's fairy dust can make you fly.
Walt Disney watched the play as a young boy in 1913. The play resonated with Walt, and he remembered the feeling he experienced when he first watched it. Walt Disney also saw a silent film of Peter Pan in 1924. This impressed Walt Disney, and many of the special effects were revolutionary for the time. The film contained many innovations, such as a live actress playing Tinkerbell, model ships and compositing tricks that would have been very difficult to achieve in the 1920s. However, the silent film used many of the traditions from the play, and this included the cast flying on wires, a performer in a dog suit as Nana, and the crocodile played by an actor in a suit. And yet this doesn't hold up well. Walt Disney knew that animation would be the perfect medium for Peter Pan, as with animation you can do anything you want. In 1929, Barrie gave the copyright of Peter Pan to the Great Ormond Street Hospital, a children's hospital in London. In 1935, Walt Disney expressed interest in doing an adaptation of Peter Pan as his second film following Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. However, the live-action film rights were held by Paramount Pictures. In 1939, Disney obtained the animation rights to the play by outbidding another studio which was also developing an animated feature film. David Hall drew the storyboards for the film. If you remember from my last video, David Hall also drew the storyboards for Alice in Wonderland. These drawings faced the same issues as in the previous picture. They were too dark for a Disney film and had a horror atmosphere that was not suitable. Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the military took control over the Disney studio and production on Peter Pan was stopped. After the war, Disney began to earn some money and 3 films were put into production. They were Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan. Mary Blair was asked to draw concept art and created some incredible paintings. For those who don't know Mary Blair, she was an incredible artist that worked for Walt Disney in the 50s, and she created some incredible artwork which focused on bright colours and shapes. Walt Disney didn't have to look too far to find the perfect Wendy for this feature. Catherine Beaumont was portraying Alice in Wonderland. Walt thought she had done an incredible job on that picture and cast her as Wendy.
I heard about Peter Pan because the studio had started working on the writing part of it. I went directly from finishing Alice and immediately started working on the voice for Wendy.
Oh, slave in the mirror, come from...
Walt also cast a Disney regular as Peter Pan.
Where is that villain, Captain Hook? I'll slice him up and throw him to the crocodile.
Bobby Driscoll, who had starred in Treasure Island and many other Disney features. In keeping with the tradition of the stage play, Hans Conried played Captain Hook and George Darlin. This film was directed by the same 3 men who directed Cinderella and Alice in Wonderland. These men were Clyde Geronimi, Hamilton Luske and Wilfred Jackson. All of Disney's 9 old men worked on this film together as directing animators. Disney's 9 old men were a group of Disney's core animators who developed the Disney style. Frank Thomas was cast as the supervising animator of Captain Hook. In development, Captain Hook was seen differently by people working on the film. Story artist Ed Penner viewed Hook as a comical con man. Director Clyde Geronimi saw him as a menacing character.
The animator who does not like the characters is going to have a flat result. You have to really get into the character. You've created them. They're with you night and day for 2 years. You better like them. You have to really like them. And if they're a villain, you have to like certain aspects of their villainy. Like Captain Hook. The story man, Ed Penner, had seen him as a foppish guy, grand manners, thought this is the way to live, midnight suppers, wine, all these gourmet connoisseur type things. That was the way he saw him. While the director saw him as a tough, mean guy who'd shoot the cannon and shoot his own crew on the ship, and he was a menacing villain. He was a menacing opponent for Peter Pan. Well, there was something to both sides, because if Peter Pan was to be the hero in conquering this villain, a guy who's very foppish here would not be effective. So you had to sort of come up with a character that would hold together through the whole thing.
Well, get on with it. Continue, my dear.
Because Thomas could not animate every scene of Hook, certain sequences were given to Wolfgang Reitherman. One scene in particular was Hook trying to escape the crocodile. These scenes added to Hook's personality. These scenes raised a few eyebrows at the time, as cartoony situations like this were usually reserved for characters like Goofy, but Woody thought this would add the much needed comedy to the film, and he was right. Ollie Johnston was Frank Thomas's best friend. They reviewed each other's scenes and developed ideas together. Walt considered assigning the role of Wendy to Ollie Johnston after his incredible animation of Alice on the previous film. Walt could sense that Ollie would not be happy doing this role, so Walt changed his mind and assigned him as the supervising animator of Smee. This was perfect to collaborate with Frank. Ollie animated him with hilarious, nervous gestures. It became one of the funniest and most appealing characters ever created.
Walt put me on Mr. Smee on Peter Pan, and I was real happy with that. He's one of my favorite characters, and I guess, in fact, I looked a little like him, or he looked a little like me, because he was bald-headed, made it more fun. And he was a kind of a foil for Captain Hook. And if Hook wanted something to happen, he knew that he could get Smee to make it happen just by saying the right thing.
Mark Davies worked on a character that became one of the most important characters in Disney pop culture. That character was Tinkerbell. Mark Davies had become a master at drawing female characters, so much so that he received the nickname the Ladies' Man. In the original play of Peter Pan, Tinkerbell was just a spot of light. This needed to be updated for animation. Mark Davies was making a character that would not speak, and so therefore the expressions and the body language needed to be clear.
The character that I worked on was Tinkerbell, and Tinkerbell was visualized as a spot of light, which no doubt was something like a strong flashlight that moved around on the background of the stage. In our medium, you couldn't just use a spot of light. So I came up with the design that you see here. She's a pure pantomime character, which in itself I think is very interesting. That she didn't talk, but you know what she's thinking.
Having worked with Mark Davies before, Les Clark joined him to help animate scenes of Tinkerbell. Les animated the scene in which Tinkerbell is accidentally trapped in a drawer. In this scene we see Tinkerbell very jealous of Wendy. Eric Larson had developed a trend of introducing the main characters in their first scene. He had animated the first scene the audience sees of Cinderella waking up and the first scene of Alice sitting in the tree. That trend continued for this film, and he animated the introduction of Peter Pan. He drew scenes of Peter when we first see him at night on the rooftop. He made the choice to keep him in a silhouette to get the audience guessing what his appearance was. In the original play production, Peter Pan was always portrayed by a woman. This tradition was broke for Disney's version of Peter Pan. Milt Kahl was one of Disney's best draftsmen. He was incredibly talented at drawing real figures with realistic anatomy. Because of this, he was often assigned to draw the human characters that were difficult to draw. It was around this time that Milt started to complain about having to animate the no-fun, straight characters, while his colleagues were assigned to work on the much more exciting roles. Ward Kimball was one of the animators that was assigned the fun, wacky characters like Lucifer in Cinderella and Tweedledum and Tweedledee in Alice. Ward Kimball's response to Milk Carl complaining was, "Yes, but you're so good at the boring stuff." I don't think Milk Carl took that too well. The most difficult assignment Milk Carl had to do on this film was making Peter Pan look weightless, not flying, but sort of floating. It's something we don't notice as the audience because it's animated so well, but it took him a while to figure out. He noticed that if he dropped the upper body first, and then let the lower body catch up, it created a believable effect. John Lounsbury animated all the early scenes with George Darling. This could have easily become a secondary character with a different animator, but with Lounsbury it became the main comedy of the Darling family. He has many outbursts looking for his cufflinks and funny interactions with the rest of the family. Same as the previous features, live action was filmed to aid the animators.
The second part of my performance after the recording was done was what was really making the film, although in this situation it wasn't a film the audience saw. It was only for the animators, and it basically was done so that the animator could watch the action taking place.
The audience always got confused when we talked about live action help. We'd say, well, an artist needs a model. You gotta have something to guide you. But it was also very helpful in little ways of a guy turning and looking back over his shoulder. How far do you turn his head? And you find if you got the real person to do it, this other arm here would come out as it turned, or have something come up to his chin, or some little thing you hadn't thought of. And very often that would make the scene come alive.
Peter Pan was first released in theatres on February the 5th, 1953. It was then re-released in 1958, 1969, 1976, 1982 and 1989. During its initial box office run, the film grossed $7 million in domestic rentals. The movie has earned a lifetime gross of $87.4 million. Adjusted for inflation and incorporating the other re-releases, the film has had a lifetime gross of $405,593,100. Damn, Disney. Rotten Tomatoes reported the film received an approval rating of 80% based on 35 reviews, with an average score of 6.92 out of 10. The reviewers at the time loved how the animation could bring the story to life. This was the first time Peter Pan could be experienced in this way. When Walt Disney was developing Disneyland, he knew he wanted a Peter Pan attraction. He developed a ride called Peter Pan's Flight. This is a dark ride in which guests hang from a rail to simulate flight. There are versions of this ride at the Magic Kingdom, Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disneyland and Shanghai Disneyland. It became one of Disneyland's most popular rides, still being very popular to this day with fast passes. The original intent of the attraction was for guests to fly through the ride as if they were Peter Pan. Audiences did not quite grasp this concept and were left wondering why Peter Pan was not in the attraction. The Walt Disney World version of the ride, which opened in 1971, expanded on the original Disneyland attraction. It now included an animatronic of Peter Pan this time around. One of the highlights of the ride is flying over London and looking down at the city. In recent updates you can now see cars driving through the streets and different buildings for the use of lights and projections. Peter Pan and the rest of the characters feature very heavily in Disney parks, including restaurants, themed areas like Skull Rock and meet and greets. Peter Pan, Wendy, Captain Hook and Mr. Smee make appearances in parades as well as greetings throughout the theme parks. Captain Hook's ship has been built at many of the Disney parks, and the one at Disneyland Paris is still there today. Tinkerbell became very important to the Disney company and became a mascot for the theme parks and the opening of movies. In fact, she's so important that I'm going to create a whole video just on the importance of Tinkerbell, as I could probably do 100 facts just about her role in Disney media, so stay tuned for that video. Neverland is a playable world in both Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, with Tinkerbell appearing as a summon. Peter Pan appears as a summon in the sequel, Kingdom Hearts 2. There was a sequel produced by Walt Disney Television Animation. Peter Pan Return to Neverland was released in theatres in 2002 and it was a direct sequel to Peter Pan. The film follows Wendy's daughter, who refuses to believe in her mother's story during the Blitz in London, only to be mistakenly brought to Neverland by the pirates. Here's a fact that I've only just found out. Catherine Beaumont, who voiced Wendy in the original, returned to record all of her dialogue to reprise her role as an older Wendy. But they decided to go with another actress for the final film, and this is a shame because I would have loved to seen an older Catherine Beaumont reprise her role.
Wendy?
Hello, Peter.
You changed.
Not really. Not ever. Hello, Tinkerbell.
There is a Tinkerbell film series. Disney Toon Studios produced a number of Tinkerbell films, including 6 feature-length straight-to-home videos. The television series Jake and the Neverland Pirates includes Hook and Smee as the main characters and is set in Neverland years after the events of the feature films. Following the success of many other Disney live-action remakes, including Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, Peter Pan is getting a live-action treatment. In March 2020, Variety reported that Alexander Molyneux and Eva Anderson were cast as Peter Pan and Wendy respectively. That same month, production on the film was halted due to the 2019 coronavirus pandemic. It will be released in 2021. Whether that is in cinemas or Disney Plus is yet to be seen. So there is 100 facts about Peter Pan. I hope you enjoyed this. Press the bell icon if you want to be notified when I release videos. The next video in this series will be 100 facts about Lady and the Tramp.